This series on how the birthing better skills developed have to do with the time frame when they developed. And this is bringing you back to the reality that our present comes from the past, what we did in the past. As I've mentioned in other videos, the birthing better skills developed in the early 1970s. At that time, in the United States and globally, cesareans were major abdominal surgery. Don't underestimate that. Women were given a general anesthetic. They were cut from their pubic bone to their belly button, and it was only done to save a woman's life. Just think about it. Even classical cesareans, which were such major abdominal surgery, only occurred in modern countries. In every other country in the world, throughout time and place, women had one type of birth. They labored and had a vaginal birth. And it wasn't until the 1980s, when the bikini cut of the low-line incision was created, that cesareans became safer and the cesarean rate began to rise. So let me just recap. Even in the 1970s, when I gave birth, 95% of women had one type of birth. They labored and had a vaginal delivery. There were also elected cesareans. If a woman had had a previous classical cesarean, she had another cesarean. And there were still emergencies or unplanned cesareans if the labor was going to risk the woman's life. In the 1980s, this changed, and it changed because of societal changes. Women got birth control, they got safe and legal termination, family size was cut down, women were going into the workforce, and fathers had been permitted into birth, and women who were having cesareans wanted to be awake. They wanted their husbands with them. So several things happened. One was people were no longer comfortable with the long labors, and so therefore the cesarean rate went up. Because in response to these societal changes, the medical profession developed what's called the bikini cut. They didn't make up that word. We started to wear bikinis, and we didn't want to be left with the ugly scar of a classical cesarean, which ran from our pubic bone to our belly button. And so with the bikini cut, with the invention of epidurals, we could be awake, our husbands could be with us, we could try for a safer vaginal birth after a cesarean, which meant we now had a different type of birth. This sounds very confusing. So it's labor, vaginal birth, labor, cesarean, no labor, have a cesarean, try for vaginal birth after cesarean, and labor and have a vaginal birth, or labor and have another cesarean. So we had more types of birth. Because birthing better fathers and mothers were developing the skills in the 1970s, we developed skills initially because 95% of us labored. That didn't mean we had good births. It was perfectly accepted, normal, natural, and physiological for there to be tragedies at births when babies died, for women to suffer in birth. That was common and had been worldwide since humanity has existed. We could labor for days and days. Our bodies could be terribly traumatized, or we could have a short birth. We could have a good birth. We could have a manageable birth. But we didn't know. There's no way to know what your birth is going to be like. So birthing better fathers and mothers in the 70s just developed more effective breathing, relaxation skills, and then added more effective communication and touch skills. And we were using those primarily in the type of birth that was a labor and a vaginal birth. And the skills that we included was also how to prepare the birth canal, not perineal massage, but all of the soft tissue in the birth canal for 5 minutes a day from 32 weeks onward. And this made a huge difference in how easily the baby could open up that last passage of our bodies. However, in the 1980s, cesarean rate tripled to almost 15%. The birth of a baby is important to each family, so Birthing Better families then wanted to make certain that our skills would be used by every family. One is to prepare for the birth, and two, to use the skills no matter what type of birth you had. And the body preparation skills that were developed in the 80s were developed primarily by fathers who were asking this question: if we can open up a woman's body, can it be easier for a baby to come down through and out? And the answer was yes, it could. We could reduce and prevent long labors where the labor didn't progress. However, if we were having a non-laboring cesarean, we enjoyed preparing our body and learning the skills together. And then we used the skills on the way to the hospital, that was our labor, while we were being prepped, that was our transition, and throughout the birth, because now we were awake during the surgical birth. Those of us who were preparing to have a vaginal birth after a cesarean, we prepared our body, learned the breathing, relaxation, communication, touch skills, and we developed the soft skills so that we could keep our labor progressing. And that often had to do with the positions that we were in that were impacting how our baby was moving down through and out our body. So we found that for those of us choosing to try to have a VBAC, or vaginal birth after a cesarean, the body skills were vitally important, particularly around the positions and postures we used during labor, which could in fact cause our labor to stall and go on for hours. If we labored and then had an unexpected surgical delivery, we committed to using our skills while we were being prepped and during the surgical delivery. In other words, what we're saying to you and what we learned is that the birth of our baby is important to us. And we are always doing the activity of birthing our baby, no matter the type of birth we have and no matter what is happening to us or around us. In other words, we committed as mothers and fathers to work together through the activity of birthing our baby. So when we look at the type of birth, Birthing Better families do not distinguish one type of birth from the other, as has been happening since the 1980s. We don't think that it is good for our society to say that this type of birth is better than that type of birth, or that that type of birth really isn't a real birth, or that type of birth that occurs in this place is not really a good birth. We chose to rise above all of that and to just merely remind ourselves of this simple fact: the birth of our baby is important to us. And we are always going to do the activity of birthing our baby. And we can do that activity better when we have learned skills, prepared our body for birth, and then used our skills to work through the activity as our birth unfolds. Birth will always remain within the first childbirth concept, which is there is no way to know what your birth is going to be like. However, that statement is often followed by, and therefore there's nothing you can really do to prepare for it. What Birthing Better families want you to know is, oh yes, there is. Learn skills, prepare your body, and then use your skills because it's an activity you are doing. And when you do it together as a family, this has a huge positive personal impact and a family impact of your ability to work together as parents.